The luxury of a private jet should mean comfort, respect, and top-tier service. But for billionaire entrepreneur Marcus Taylor, his flight took a shocking turn the moment he stepped on board. Dressed in a sleek designer suit, Marcus was used to first-class treatment. After all, he had built his empire from the ground up. But the pilot, a man who clearly judged him by his skin color rather than his success, had other ideas. From the moment Marcus greeted the crew, the pilot's cold stare and dismissive attitude made it clear. He didn't think Marcus belonged there. Then things escalated. A rude remark here, a passive-aggressive comment there, until the tension finally exploded into something much worse. But karma has a way of showing up when you least expect it, and just 5 minutes later, the very man who tried to belittle Marcus found himself in a situation he never saw coming. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. He had dealt with people like this before, those who judged first and asked questions later. But something about this pilot's attitude felt different. It wasn't just coldness, it was outright hostility. Every word dripped with sarcasm, every glance filled with something unspoken but undeniable. As Marcus settled into his seat, the pilot's voice came over the intercom, his tone sharp. "Hope everyone's ready for the flight. Some of us are exactly where we belong." A few passengers exchanged confused looks, but Marcus knew that jab was meant for him. He could feel it. Still, he stayed silent. He had learned long ago that success spoke louder than words. But just as he adjusted his watch, he caught something strange. The flight attendant looked nervous, almost afraid, as she whispered something to the co-pilot. Something was off, and Marcus had a feeling this flight was about to take a turn no one expected. Marcus kept his expression calm, but his instincts told him something wasn't right. He watched as the flight attendant's hands trembled while she poured a drink for a nearby passenger. The co-pilot glanced toward the cockpit, his jaw tight. Whatever they were whispering about, it wasn't just routine flight talk. Meanwhile, the pilot strutted down the aisle, his presence impossible to ignore. "You sure you're comfortable?" he asked Marcus, his voice laced with something close to mockery. "Don't usually see passengers like you flying solo on jets like these." Marcus gave him a steady look. "I own this jet," he said simply. The pilot blinked, caught off guard for just a second before forcing a smirk. "That's so," he muttered before walking away. But Marcus wasn't focused on him anymore. His eyes shifted to the cockpit door, slightly ajar. A glimpse inside revealed a warning light flashing on the control panel. Something was definitely wrong, and it had nothing to do with him being on this plane. Marcus's heartbeat quickened as he studied the flashing light inside the cockpit. He wasn't an aviation expert, but he knew enough to recognize a warning signal when he saw one. The co-pilot's tense expression only confirmed his suspicion. Something wasn't right with the jet. Yet, the pilot didn't seem the least bit concerned. The flight attendant passed by again, her forced smile barely hiding her unease. Marcus caught her eye. "Everything okay?" he asked in a low voice. She hesitated, then nodded quickly before rushing off. That was all the confirmation he needed. There was a problem, and for some reason, no one wanted to talk about it. Then, a sudden jolt. The plane dipped slightly, causing murmurs of concern among the passengers. Marcus gripped the armrest, eyes darting toward the cockpit. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, but this time the arrogance was gone. Instead, his tone was tight, almost nervous. "Ladies and gentlemen, we might have a situation." A low murmur spread through the cabin as passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus remained still, his mind racing. The pilot's sudden shift in tone told him one thing: he had lost control, and now reality was setting in. But what exactly was the problem? The turbulence worsened, shaking the jet harder this time. Overhead compartments rattled, and a few gasps filled the cabin. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt slightly, ready to move if needed. He looked toward the cockpit again, and that's when he saw it, the co-pilot standing stiffly near the door, his face pale. Something had gone very wrong. Then, the flight attendant rushed forward, whispering something urgently to the co-pilot. The man hesitated before nodding and stepping into the cabin. He cleared his throat, but his voice wavered. "Ladies and gentlemen, our captain is unwell. I need everyone to remain calm." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The arrogant pilot, the same man who had spent the entire flight belittling him, was now incapable of flying the jet, and judging by the fear in the co-pilot's eyes, they were running out of time to figure out what to do next. A stunned silence fell over the cabin. The passengers sat frozen, processing the co-pilot's words. Marcus, however, wasted no time. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. "What do you mean, unwell?" he asked firmly. The co-pilot hesitated, then lowered his voice. "He's unconscious. He complained about feeling dizzy earlier, but now he's out cold." Marcus's mind raced. This was no ordinary emergency. They were in midair with no captain, and panic could spread at any moment. "Can you land this jet?" he asked. The co-pilot swallowed hard. "I can try, but this model, I don't have full training on it." For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. That's when Marcus made a decision. "I know a thing or two about flying," he admitted. "I've trained on smaller jets before." The co-pilot stared at him, then nodded. "Then let's get to the cockpit." As they rushed inside, Marcus noticed something. The pilot's water bottle tipped over on the floor. A strange residue lined the inside. His stomach twisted. This wasn't just a medical emergency. Something, or someone, had made sure the pilot wouldn't finish this flight. Marcus didn't have time to dwell on the water bottle mystery. Right now, landing the jet was all that mattered. With the co-pilot guiding him, he gripped the controls, his training kicking in. The plane jolted as they descended, the runway coming into view. Every second felt like an eternity, but Marcus stayed focused, steadying the jet as they approached the ground. With a final deep breath, he pulled back slightly. Then the wheels touched down. A rough landing, but they were safe. A wave of relief washed over the cabin as passengers broke into applause. As paramedics rushed in to tend to the unconscious pilot, Marcus handed the suspicious water bottle to the authorities. "Might want to test this," he said.